Well, coming up on today's show, Hyundai turn up the Kona production, the Chinese kick off production of solid-state batteries, but we'll dig into that story just a little bit more, and a recap on VW's plans, plus big oil versus EV subsidies, part 2. Well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, in fact, wherever you are in the world. My name is Martyn Lee. Welcome to EV News Daily. It's Thursday, the 22nd of November, and I've been through every EV story I can find in the last 24 hours, so you don't have to. Before we start with the news, a mention for our friends at myev.com. They do help make this show. They have also added a great way for you to answer this week's question of the week. They've added a feedback form on their website, and I'll give you all the details at the end. And whilst you're on myev.com, maybe you want to be checking out some used EVs to buy, or maybe you're looking to trade in, trade up, and you're looking to sell. It's good for both of those things. Let's start with the first big story today here in the UK, the Hyundai Kona, or Hyundai, or Hyundai. There's a million different ways that people seem to say it around the world. Well, the Kona Electric recently underwent an overnight surprise price increase. It was around 10%, depending on what model, a little bit more, a little bit less. Actually, when you factor in the fact that our EV subsidy went down by £1,000 around the same time as well. It was a real hit that many people took on the Kona. Did they underprice it originally? Is this them saying they are going to go for a profit on each car, and that they were selling it either at cost or at a loss? Is this just the market and demand? Well, demand's high. The waiting list here is 11 months, so they can put the price up. Earlier this year, we heard from our Norwegian listeners as well. They told me they placed their money down, and a few were lucky enough to get their cars first, actually, again, in Norway, though. It's a case of demand outstripping supply. Now we hear that for the last month, production has been increased. 4,600 electric Konas were made last month, with the split around 50-50. That would be 50% of them staying in the domestic market for the South Korean buyers, and half of them going to export. Well, a friend of mine with knowledge of this, and I can't say any more than that, has previously told me that the long-range model, the 64 kilowatt-hour model, is by far and away the most popular one that people are going for, and it's the one that Hyundai are increasing production of. 4,000 to 5,000 cars a month, if it fluctuates in that range, puts them to 50 to 60,000 cars per year, and that's pretty good. In any other world, apart from one where the Model 3 exists, we'd be saying that was fantastic, enormously impressive, but considering the Model 3 has already done 125,000 made, roughly, and their target is 7,000 per week. Even if they're making 5,000 per week, let's compare apples to apples. We're talking about 4,000 to 5,000 Konas a week. Well, let's say maybe that's a month. So that's 4,000 to 5,000 Konas a month. If we compare the numbers, well, that's 20 to 28,000 Model 3s. Just so it shows the vast difference in scale from Tesla to all the others. But it can only be good news if they are making more of the Kona, a car that many people are incredibly fond of, even with the price rate rises. And hopefully, if you have yours on order, you get it soon. Well, a week after showing a hint of the new 2020 model year Kia Soul, Kia's gone and shown us actually a lot of the new hatchback in another teaser photo. It reveals almost the entire side profile of the Soul, and a few other teasers give us a peek of the interior. Now, overall, it's right between evolution and revolution of the current model, say Autoblog today. On the evolution side, the Soul is most definitely the Kia Soul. It's a funky, if you're being generous, boxy shape. The only thing at an angle is the windscreen, or the windshield, as you might say, and those design cues are most definitely there. The window line at the back kicks up to form the car's distinct triangular D-pillar, and as we've seen in the spy shots, the electric model is going to be having a range of over 200 miles, as far as we know. The battery being used in the Kia Soul EV is the same one being used in the Kia e-Niro. Regular version, regular range, 39.2 kilowatt hours, I believe. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to find out more details about the Kia Soul. It certainly has a fan base here in the UK. I understand why. It's quirky, but people love it. And actually, under the skin, it's been around a little while now. When they first made the Kia Soul electric, actually, they made a really darn good car for not a lot of money. You can buy one now, you can get one on lease. It's a great car. I know people that have got them and really rave about them. They're not for everybody, and their styling, as if I'm being generous, is quirky. It's not for everyone, but then again, many EVs, sort of first gen, first attempt EVs, that first Leaf, wasn't to everybody's styling. Well, moving on to China, and I'm fascinated by solid-state batteries because of the technology has had so much potential in solid-state batteries, and yet the major players, from Elon Musk to Panasonic, all say no one is anywhere close to cracking the commercialization of solid-state batteries. There's a new Chinese startup. They've been going a little while now. They're called Qingdao, and they're the Qingdao Energy Development Company. They launched their first production line of solid-state batteries in the city of Kunshan, East China's Jiangsu province. This is according to Mark Kane over at Inside EVs. Through the investment of $144 million, the company's developed a production line. Now, that production line is good for 100 megawatt hours of solid-state cells every single year. That would be, if you were making 50 kilowatt hour packs, for instance, for a pretty kind of mid-range nice EV, that would be enough for 2,000 of them every single year. It's not enough for the automotive industry, at least not for cars that are affordable. So the first cells are going to be used on special equipment, high-end digital products, and maybe, I would say, very, very high-end EVs would be the first place that this technology goes because of the cost. I've no way of verifying these claims, though, and so many Chinese companies do want to be seen by many, including the Chinese state, as leading the way, leading the world in technology, in brain power, and there are many Chinese doing that, Chinese companies doing that. There's also, over the years, been plenty of press releases put out, and it hasn't exactly come to fruition. They talk a very good game at times. I'm not saying this is the case with these solid-state batteries, but we've seen no more than this first piece of news. So we stay open-minded and we'll see what they come up with. It would seem strange to my tiny brain for a small Chinese company to have done first what all the major cell makers not only haven't done, but say, well, we're working on it with the best brains in the world, and it's 10 years away. So everyone, including Toyota, say that could be the future of cells and storage, but it ain't here yet. Of course, Fisker is one car maker promising solid-state batteries. Not in 10 years, in a year and a half. They say 2020 they'll put their Fisker car on sale, and it will be powered by solid-state batteries. So to make that promise, and unless that's total fabrication, which we don't think it is, that surely must mean they've got the batteries in place now, they're being fully tested, they're being crash tested, they're being stress tested for charging and discharging rates and different heat, very hot, very cold, all those kind of things, different climates. So, if they're a year and a half away, if they're talking 2020, for 2 years away even, for solid-state batteries being in a Fisker car which you can buy, they must be quite a long way down the road with that. I'll put a link to the Inside EVs article in the show notes. Next up, and an Electrek report on what to do with used Teslas. Well, the answer, it seems, is to get them turned around and get them sold. According to a new report on CNBC, Tesla's now working with Mannheim and Odessa KAR to sell larger volumes of vehicles through wholesale customers. That means auctions, if we're talking Mannheim. Well, to manage a growing used car business, Tesla's beginning to rely on outside firms like Mannheim and Odessa. According to two people familiar with the situation, these businesses help move and manage used cars, putting them through inspections, reconditioning, and sales to wholesale customers. Well, Tesla's currently receiving a big influx of vehicles as more 3-year lease cars are ending. Now, the automaker is now handling an increasing number of used cars, and it outlined in its latest earnings that it expects its used car business to actually grow significantly. So when a lease ends or an owner upgrades, Tesla generally takes back the vehicle, then they refurbish it and put it back on sale in its own inventory. I've looked at buying a Tesla myself here in the UK, a CPO car, a certified pre-owned, and the last time I checked, they were still using catalogue photos or stock images, not of those of the actual cars. And it's one of the few reasons, I suppose. There's not a Tesla sitting on my driveway. The other one being that they're still too expensive. And like I go back to saying I'm a weirdo that doesn't want to get in debt just for a car, because there's cheaper cars out there, and they're still £45,000, £50,000, and I couldn't see a picture of the car I wanted to buy. And so one of the reasons I was thinking, well, that's weird. They just put stock photos of a nice, shiny, new-looking one. Now, that hasn't been a problem in the past because with Tesla certified pre-owned cars, they fix them, all the cosmetic damage. And if there's scuffs and scrapes, their used cars are, up until now, have really been treated very well. I'm going to say as good as new, but you know what I mean. Obviously, the batteries have gone through cycles and the motor's been used, but as good as new, you know, if you get what I mean. Now, they check them mechanically very comprehensively, but all of that tarting up, as I might say, has had to stop. There's just too many cars to do that with. I'll put a link to the electric article if you want to read more. Well, I think I pronounce it Schaeffler, or Scheffler, has begun the volume production now of transmission for the Audi e-tron. The transmission is available in both parallel axles and coaxial versions, and it offers a high input torque with a low design envelope requirement. What do they mean by that? Well, both variants of their new drive transmission are fitted in the new Audi e-tron. Of course, we can start talking about the legendary Audi Quattro brand. They have a rear-wheel drive on the axle there, and also a front-wheel drive that's entirely different kind of transmission, but both of them work together in combination for all-wheel drive. And by the time it's been through the Audi marketing department, of course, we would call it Quattro. The two electric motors provide really impressive performance, they say. Dr. Jochen Schroeder is the head of e-mobility at Schaeffler, and he said the two transmissions for Audi that we have in volume production since August, for the future, we'll be making 250,000 transmissions per year. Thanks to the modularity of our products, we can adapt transmission for other applications. And I'll put a link to that press release in the show notes if you want to read more about one of the many suppliers that VW are using for their EVs. And this time it happens to be transmissions on the legendary four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive Audi e-tron Quattro. Well, British Columbia's Premier said today that his government is going to introduce legislation next year that's going to require the every new light-duty car and truck sold in the province by 2040 to be electric or zero-emission, according to a new Reuters report today. The Premier, John Horgan, said the province is going to phase in targets, it won't be overnight, applying to new vehicles, 10% by 2025, 30% by 2030, 100% by 2040. Electric vehicle sales are booming in Canada, more than doubling in the second quarter of this year compared to the same period last year, according to the clean tech data firm Fleet Karma. Demand is still, though, far lower than for conventional vehicles. Tesla's Model 3 is the most popular in Canada. That's then followed by the Leaf and the Bolt. And a quick recap on VW's plans, actually. We've had so much news over the last week. There was leak upon leak upon leak upon semi-press release. Then on Friday, we had that big hour-long press release, and I've not played any audio on the podcast. It got kind of deep, and actually I watched the whole thing, and it was in German, with translators, obviously, but I thought, hey, I'll put loads of clips on the podcast, and I thought, you know what, it's kind of dry. It's the VW Board of Management giving a press conference in German. So, although I get a kick out of watching that, I think, you know, I've got to draw a line. I've got to draw a geekiness line somewhere, and that's where I drew the line. So I sat and watched that for an hour. Last week they streamed it live on YouTube and on their website, and I thought, let's have a little recap of where we are. So a recap on VW's plans over the last week, where we've got to now. A reminder, it's called a Roadmap E, and Volkswagen, they say, are now going to be consistently promoting e-mobility. By 2025, a quarter of their turnover is going to be produced by battery-driven vehicles alone. With the new architecture, which is the MEB, the Modular Electric Drive System, and their new electric platform, the Volkswagen Group is developing two new platforms purely for electric cars. So everyone's doing it in their own way. Some people are doing it where they can slot in a fossil engine, a hybrid, a battery, and that's their way of doing it. That works. And VW have gone down the route of this platform is purely for electric cars. That forms the basis for their future fleet. In addition, Ionity, co-funded by Volkswagen, is the network that's being set up, a Europe-wide network of fast chargers, 400 stations, built by 2020, and yes, that does include the new 350 kilowatt ultra-fast chargers. In the next 5 years, Volkswagen Group will invest 44 billion euros in future investment of electric mobility and autonomous driving and new mobility services. There's kind of three prongs to this, and a bit of what they call digitalization as well. But to put that in context, and I've mentioned this before, and I want people go really hard on VW, and I know why, I get that, but it's a third of their total investments from 2019 to 2023. They're big numbers, but it's a third of their investment. Okay, 2/3 still in fossils. We get that. But they are taking it seriously now. We want to take e-mobility out of its niche and make the e-car affordable for millions of people. This is based on large-scale, efficient production, says Thomas Ulbrich. He's the member of board of management for VW brand, responsible for the e-mobility. Now, for that reason, the German location will be expanded. You've got the Zwickau plant with its annual capacity of 330,000 electric cars. That comes first. In the future, the electric small cars and sedans from the VW brands, the same brands will be made in Emden. And the Hanover plant will focus on the ID. Buzz family, and alongside conventionally driven vehicles as well. In 2020, they are aiming for 150,000 electric cars. 2025, that rises to 1 million worldwide. That's a recap on where VW is, and a final recap on big oil versus EV subsidies. Bloomberg has taken their own view on the big oil lobbying that's breaking out in the US right now over EV subsidies. So GM, Tesla, Nissan got together to argue that we need to help people into electric mobility. And I think, personally, due to the success of Tesla's ramp this year particularly, the lobbying from big oil has dramatically increased this year. Addressing climate change, says Bloomberg, means encouraging a switch away from emitting vast quantities of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere in order to power our societies. Leaving aside the unfortunate desire of certain parties to ignore or obfuscate the science framing that threat, the central question now is how to encourage that switch efficiently. In general, handing out regressive subsidies based on the government elevating a certain type of technology, while perhaps politically more doable, doesn't meet the objective. And I was reporting yesterday on some of the lobbying that's being done now by oil companies to say they've had a report done that a lot of the tax subsidies, the tax credits in the US, which is the US way of doing it, has mostly been claimed by people who earn $100,000 or more per year. And that's their argument. It's EV subsidies just help the rich. Well, a far more efficient method, claimed Bloomberg, is to put a price on the stuff you want less of and then just let capitalism do its thing, pushing consumption away from the undesirables and investment towards the innovative alternatives. Indeed, all those letters that are being sent demand government officials stand back and let the market do its thing, except their version of the market, the oil industry's version, leaves out one element. Greenhouse gases are the threat that are posed to everyone's problem. We all need to deal with it. But the individual generating them at any one given moment doesn't have to pay anything towards the problem they're creating. So if you dump your garbage on your neighbour's lawn, they argue, you'll wind up paying to have it removed, and you'll probably be fined as well. If you put 20 pounds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by burning 1 gallon of gasoline, to you that's a freebie. This is an enormous subsidy for fossil fuels, and it makes a mockery of that market piety. It's a brilliant article. I highly recommend you read as much of it as you can on Bloomberg. I'll put a link in the show notes for you to have a look at, but it really debunks a lot of the arguments coming from the fossil fuel industry about EV subsidies or any help that's given to e-mobility because of all the subsidies that are baked in to the fossil fuel industry. Fascinating stuff. Thank you very much for listening to today's show. As always, thank you very much for everyone that sent me in the answer to the question of the week. Thanks to myev.com for setting this one. Here is your question of the week this week. Since most car dealers are pretty clueless when it comes to EVs, some are good, most aren't. What's the best way to move forward? Is it to try and get the dealers on board, or is it a new model? Is it something like someone comes to your house or your work with an EV, they drive it to you, it's on the back of a lorry or something, or a flatbed, and then they educate you all about it, tell you about it, teach you about EVs, how your driving style is different, how your behaviour, your life will change in terms of when you charge and how you charge. Then you can make an informed decision. You can have that car to drive for a couple of days. But in return for all of that, there is a small fee to pay. Let me know. You can answer online, like I say, myev.com. Click on that research section at the top, and then question of the week. You can email me directly. It's hello@evnewsdaily.com. And of course, YouTube and Facebook comments are always there as well. Thank you to 120 patrons of the show, whose generosity means that you get to listen to this. And if you would like to be in their number, check out patreon.com/evnewsdaily. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, and there are 303 previous episodes online for free, well, you can do. Now, it's free to subscribe to, and it means you get them first and automatically as well. If you can, in return for me making this show, leave a little mini review or a star rating, I don't mind. Do what, 1 star, 5 stars, whatever you think it's worth, on whatever platform you listen to. I know you're busy. I know you haven't got time, but if you have, it would be amazing. It really, really helps out. In the meantime, catch up on the socials, on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.